Welcome to Dear Watchers, an omniversal comic book podcast where we do a deep dive into the multiverse.
We are traveling with you through the stories and the worlds that make up an omniverse of fictional reality we all love. And your watchers on this journey are me, Guido O.
And me, Rob Snarf.
Nice.
And we have the spirit of our cat ancestors fading into view. It's Jaga. Wait, no, I mean, it's Mike from Multiverse of Badness. Hi, Mike.
Hello, how are you doing? I love the intro of your show. If you're ever lucky enough to be a guest like I am, and I love the show, it's amazing because they actually put the music in while we're recording, so it feels like it's not like me that does everything in post. They do it like live. It's amazing. I love you guys. I'm super excited to be on here. Thank you for having me.
It's a fully immersive experience.
Yes, we need to incorporate like the morning zoo sound effects board next, Guido, with boing,
snarf, snarf. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, Mike is.
Exactly. Mike is a returning guest and a friend of the show and the host of the deviously fun Multiverse of Badness, where they look at the bad, the ugly, and the weird funny books so you don't have to. Mike, can you tell us anything else about MOB?
You know what? I am one of your hosts. We have another co-host, Zach, from Swansea, Wales. So you get the hillbilly in me. You get the deep, rich, plush voice of Zach. We really we don't take any of this seriously. We are just literally reading books and having a good time. We'd love to have anyone that wants to listen to us. But you guys do an actual good job of reviewing books. We're just over there acting like jerks. So yeah, that's all we do.
Well, I think everyone should get into the mob mentality. Mike, you can use that if you want. Have you ever used that?
Not the mob mentality. We've got the mob squad, but yeah, we'll use the mob mentality.
There you go.
So yeah, I like it.
And now, before we begin today's travel itinerary, Guido, what's new in our little section of the multiverse?
Well, I'll keep it short. We're just counting down to 100 episodes, and we don't even know that we're going to be doing anything all that special for 100, but it's still exciting that we reached 100 episodes. I was looking at the timeline or the plan I used to sort when we're going to cover stuff so that we can alternate between like Marvel, DC, other stuff, and I had stopped numbering at 100. So I guess I didn't anticipate that we were going further, but I think we are. So here we are. So we, as we said last week, just want to keep growing as we approach 100. So if you didn't yet post about this episode or text a friend about this episode or tell your local comic shop about us, please do that this week.
Mm-hmm. You guys are not allowed to stop. You've got to keep going. I don't care what your paper says.
We started during the pandemic, so maybe we thought the whole world would no longer be around by the time we hit 100.
I live in Tennessee, so who the fuck knows?
That's true. There's still time. We still have a few episodes, so it could still be the apocalypse. If you are joining us for the first time, we have 3 parts of our journey today: origins of the story, what inspired this other reality; exploring multiversity, we dive deeper into our alternate universe; and pondering possibilities, we examine the impact and what's followed or coming in the future.
And remember, you can support us over on our Ko-fi by visiting dearwatchers.com, and you can support Multiverse of Badness over on their Patreon by searching for that. We are patrons and happy to be.
Yes. And with that, dear watchers, welcome to episode 93, and let's check out what's happening in the Omniverse with our travels to today's alternate universe. Ho! There's so many great ThunderCats quotes.
Yeah, I'd say ThunderCats is more quotable, has more of that kind of stuff we can insert than He-Man does.
That's true. Today, as we proceed through customs, we will visit a place where the question that gets answered is, what if He-Man teamed up with the ThunderCats? Or more importantly, what would happen if Skeletor and Mumm-Ra amalgamated and had the Sword of Power?
And this is an Earth of an unknown origin from DC. It was seen once in this 2016 miniseries, which we'll get into soon. And before we do that, Mike, you suggested we cover this. Why?
Different reasons, primarily because I wasn't aware of it, and a friend of mine who also collects comic books, come to find out I haven't seen him in years, and he started collecting comic books. I got back into comics, and he came by with some boxes that I kind of helped him with, and he had that miniseries in there, and I was like, I didn't even know this existed. This is amazing. So yeah, it was just a wild. It makes sense, though. I mean, really, when you think about it, the ThunderCats are technically just cat versions of He-Man. So, I mean, it really, when you read it together, it made a lot of sense. But when I first saw it, and the covers of the books are amazing. I really love the artwork. It's a little, crude's the wrong word, but it's just it feels like something really, it's something not as funny as you think it would be and a little more in-depth than you would expect.
Yeah. Yes, for sure.
Let's kick off our first segment, and we will have a chance to share our own origins in our origins of the story.
Right now on this very show, you're going to get the answer to all your questions. Our amazing story begins a few years ago.
All right, kitty cats. So we want to talk He-Man and the Masters of the Universe and ThunderCats, give a little background on these franchises, and find out each of our own backgrounds with them. And first up is He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. Starting as a toy line in 1982, it became a television show in 1983, lasting for 130 episodes, followed by the spin-off She-Ra, a live-action movie in 1987, a reboot New Adventures in 1990s, another reboot show in 2002, and more toys over the last 25 years than probably any toy line ever. A very good reboot of She-Ra in 2018, and an also very good requel or reboot sequel series in 2021, and a new CGI series that same year, and a constant rumors of fits and starts in development of a new live-action film, which maybe is in production or development, who knows? It changes day to day. We first discussed He-Man on episode 67, so go listen to that. When in his full-sized comics appearance, his first full-size comic appearance, he met up with Superman. So now Guido, speaking of comics, is going to give us a little history of He-Man in comics.
So we did some of this in episode 67. I'll be brief. The toys originally came with mini comics and still do. So He-Man really started with a comic universe built around him. DC had the license briefly. They were publishing the mini comics, and so they did a few issues. Then Marvel got the license for their Star imprint, which is where they had all their kids' television shows licenses in the 1980s. And during this, the mini comics are still coming out, so there are dozens and dozens of them. London Editions in the UK is releasing He-Man comics original to that run. They're oversized, beautiful color, totally original stories, great art. There are over 70 of those. And there's a daily newspaper strip for 5 years. Disappears for about a decade until the early 2000s when MV Creations does some publishing, Image, and then Dark Horse all get the license a little bit till 2012 when DC picks it up again. Does it for a pretty substantial run with a couple dozen issues, including the miniseries we read today. And now Dark Horse most recently has the license. They published a Revelations tie-in, and they're currently publishing the Masterverse miniseries, which is a perfect series that we will one day cover because it's Zodak and Sorceress basically glimpsing into alternate He-Man worlds. Every issue, there's 2 different worlds, 2 different artists. Cool concept, and one day we'll get to it.
Oh, that sounds exciting. And let's talk a little bit about our backgrounds with He-Man. Mike, what about you? What's your background with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe?
Not nearly as deep, apparently, as Guido's. I had no idea a lot of this stuff happened. You guys are talking, well, even Rob, too. You guys are talking series and comic books, and me, I'm sitting here, I played with the action figures when I was a kid. And I can honestly say this about the action figures. They were amazing, and not so much He-Man and the good guys. I love the bad guys. They all had like a little shtick. They had the guy with the multi-faces. They had a guy with a triclops. They had a snake that would spit. They had a guy named Webstore. The bad guys were just badass, and they were just swole and buff as shit. I mean, this is what action figures were supposed to look like. I wasn't even big into, I'm not sure exactly what it was. I guess at the time it was the action figure, so maybe I was. But yeah, just fun action figures to play with, and As a kid that grew up in the South, I was big into wrestling, so they were always doing wrestling matches against one another. So yeah, they were just a lot of fun, a lot of fun. And then of course the cartoons were fun, and yeah, they're just stupid, but the original cartoon were just stupid, but predictable. But hey, I loved it. So yeah, just I was there for the beginning, and I'm here for this because yeah, ThunderCats were part of that too. But we'll talk about them later.
Did you ever, as an adult, get back into your He-Man fandom? Like, do you have a toy sitting around on a shelf or anything like that?
I bet you I have a box of He-Man figures. It's probably still in my parents' basement. I'm the guy, I'm 50 plus years old, and there's still a box in my parents' basement that has shit in it. So I bet you at one point or another I'm going to go in that box. I found some of my old I found some old Star Wars action figures a few months ago. So I found the old Boba Fett I sent off for and a couple of those. So yeah, it's I'm sure that they exist where. Who knows? But no, I never got back into them now.
You might be sitting on a gold mine somewhere.
No, the thing is that you learn, and I learned this sadly, is first off, my mom was particularly one of those people that love yard sales. So she would make me go through and get rid of any toy I wasn't playing with. So I sold the majority of my shit at yard sales. There's a handful I kept that meant a little bit here and there to me, but all the good stuff, especially one called JJ Arms. If you don't know, you got to look up JJ Arms. He's amazing. It's like you'd swap out his hands. It's based on a real-life detective that's kind of an asshole. But, yeah, as a kid, he wore a leather jacket, had a red suitcase, like the epitome of cool-ass toys. But, yeah, I don't know where he's at. But, yeah, I was hard on my toys. I played hard. Like I said, I wrestled with them. We were talking about those old superhero action figures. Every one of mine had like broken legs and things, so they had a full body outfit, but you could still cram the leg in the bottom and it would spin around because it was broken. So yeah, all my action figures not worth anything. They're just more fun to look at, because they are just hot garbage now.
Yeah, that's how my He-Man toys are, and my She-Ras, which I loved because they had the hair. All of them have like braided hair, or I cut all their hair off so they would have like a nice crew cut. So they are worthless, but I love them.
Yeah, I made that mistake again to go back to wrestling. I had a couple of action figures with hair, and again back to wrestling, which was a big thing when I was a kid. Part of a wrestling match, there was a loser get their haircut match. So if somebody with the hair lost the wrestling match, they got the haircut. So I had a whole bunch of bald people too. So yeah, I'm feeling you, Guido.
Yeah.
I guess I'm a little too young for the actual original Motu action figure line. I really came to the series through to the franchise, mostly through the live action movie. I taped it off of WPIX, famous station in the New York area, and I just watched the heck out of that. I constantly, once a month probably, I watch that, and I think it's underappreciated as a movie. I really like the He-Man Masters of the Universe movie. Yeah, and then I watched also the Christmas special a lot. I didn't even watch too much of the original animated series too, because I think it was, again, I was slightly missed it. I watched some of the New Adventures, and I had some of those action figures. So I was a really big fan, but through these things that are not really the fundamentals of what most people who are Motu fans are.
But that's a nice thing, and there's many points of entry, right? Like that's why, even as our listeners know, He-Man is one of my top franchises. I love it. I have loved it for 41 years, as old as He-Man is, I am. And it's cool, like even the CG series in 2021, I didn't watch it, but people loved it, and I have no problem with it. It's cool to me that there are these different versions of it, and that was running parallel to Revelations, did not taint my experience. It just meant different people were able to get different things out of it, because it's such a cool world. It does have these quirky characters that Mike was describing, and they did a lot of story building, even though the show is not great at story most of the time, possibly all of the time. It's just the potential is there. So that's why it's cool to see all these different versions.
And I do have to say this. Whoever thought to put a skeleton face on a buff-ass dude, you couldn't have paid those guys enough money. Say what you want to about Skeletor being a chump in the cartoon series. He is one of the baddest ass-looking villains there is. There's just no question about it.
Yes. Well, now I'm gonna have sight beyond sight and move into our
Nice.
our next franchise. So let's get into ThunderCats.
Oh!
Thundercat. Thank you. I guess you have to say it after every time.
do.
Well, maybe we
No,
shouldn't. That would be too
We'll
much.
slow us down.
But ThunderCats began as a syndicated animated TV show and ran from 1985 to 1989 for 4 seasons and 130 episodes. Created by Ted Tobin Wolfe and developed by Leonard Starr, it featured Japanese animation but was written and produced in the U.S. by Rankin Bass, the Christmas special fame people that you've seen, Rudolph and all those
Stop
things.
motion stuff. Yeah.
It was It was given a 1-season reboot with a slightly different origin story on Cartoon Network in 2011-2012. And then Cartoon Network tried again in 2020 with a more kid-centric Teen Titans Go kind of version titled ThunderCats Roar, which lasted 1 season of 52 11-minute episodes. ThunderCats has also had a toy line, a video game in 1987, plus later web games, a board game, various merch, and kind of like He-Man, there has been a film version in development on and off for years. Most recently, Warner Brothers announced a version that was going to be directed or will be directed by Adam Wingard, which would be kind of cool. That's kind of neat. And at one point, circa 2014, there was a ThunderCats museum, but their website no longer works. So Mark, the curator, if you're listening and out there, if the museum is still around, let us know. But they have also had a long history in comics, which Guido will tell us about right now.
Well, it's actually not that long. So it starts as a Marvel title, also under the Star imprint, running for 24 issues, actually more than Marvel had the He-Man license for. Interestingly, though, there are very few comics for the ThunderCats in the US. The longest run is Marvel UK publishes ThunderCats, totally original stories to the UK issues, hard to find, high value, for 129 issues.
Yeah, see, that's long.
That is long, but it's specific to Marvel UK. Like, no one knows about it. They're not collected anywhere. They're quite hard to find. If you go on eBay, there's maybe like 3 issues at a time up there for ridiculous money per issue. So it's not until 2002 that Wildstorm starts publishing, in part because Wildstorm is then an imprint of DC, which is owned by Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers owns ThunderCats. They bought the company that owned it in the 90s. So they do a few minis and one-shots, including a Superman crossover that we do need to cover one day. But all of this just lasts for 2 years, till 2004. There is a new UK strip that they try in 2012 with the new show. And then, shockingly, the only other American comic since 2004 is what we are covering today from 2016. And then the creator, though, himself has some neat connections to comics that Rob is going to share before we get into our backgrounds.
Yeah, Leonard Starr, who developed the ThunderCats TV series, he wrote the Bible, wrote most of the episodes. He actually wrote it at the age of 60. He's actually an InkSpot award winner and a comics legend. His long history in comics includes drawing the original Human Torch and Submariner for Timely Comics, working for Joe Simon and Jack Kirby on Young Romance, providing art for Morbius, DC's Who's Who, and Action Comics in the 70s and 80s, and taking over the comic strip Little Orphan Annie from 1979 to 2000. So really a comics legend, mostly in the art world, who also happened to be the main writer of this 80s kids TV show.
Yeah. So, Mike, what was your ThunderCats background?
Well, first off, I have to say it's a shame you can't find those ThunderCats because you can find Plasma, that UK imprint Marvel, everywhere, and you've got this cool-ass UK ThunderCats run you can't find. But
I know.
Yeah, my experience is similar to the He-Man, the Masters of the Universe experience. Not quite as detailed. I did not have the action figures for this, but the cartoon was on quite regularly. This is completely a dumb thing to talk about, but in the precursor to the internet, you had local, like, you could get on a small group where like 4 to 8 people could get on a server together, and we played games. And one of the games was Galaxy Conquest, and another was Deck War, which is pretty much like a Star Trek thing. But we all, for some reason, used Thundercat names. So there was I was Snarf, of course. But yeah, that's pretty much my experience is literally not as deep. But the Thundercats cartoon, to me, was a lot more fun, I guess. It was like, don't get me wrong, I have the power, kind of cheesy, but man, when when Lion-O would get going with his fucking sword, he was like, the Thundercats are on the mood. The music was so much better. It was more of a mood than you could really. It almost like just drew you in with the action, and at times Masters of the Universe not as action packed as you would think. The Thundercats were very much more action packed and just a more interesting watch, I thought, as a cartoon for a kid.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I liked Thundercats a lot as a kid. I had all the figures, and I would watch the TV show. It never had the place in my heart He-Man did. I didn't watch ever the reboot of Thundercats, and I've never really been back into the franchise. We rewatched a few of the early episodes in preparation for this, and they are, again, nothing will ever chop He-Man for me, but they are better story, better action. The music is awesome. There is cool, like, mystical world building, which is, He-Man has some mystical stuff in Sorceress, but I think the fact that Thundercats didn't feel that they needed to do standalone episodes, which He-Man is 100% standalone episodes.
And not to interrupt, but I believe that, to me, Mumm-Ra always felt like more of a threat in the cartoons than Skeletor. Mumm-Ra, you always felt like, this guy's gonna kill somebody, where Skeletor is like, this guy just bumbling around like a moron. So yeah, there was a gravity.
Watching his first appearances, which is in the second episode, just to prepare for this, he's generally scary. As you said, Mike, Skeletor looks really cool, but of course, the Alan Oppenheimer depiction on the cartoon is mostly pretty comedic. He's
a bumbling fool, and he's
bumbling.
And he's sassy, he's fun, but
he's
Mumm-Ra's
fun,
scary.
but he's not scary. But when you first see Mumm-Ra and he's coming out of that coffin, he's pretty scary. I think even the decrepit version of him is so much scarier even than the macho, giant, bulky version. There's something very creepy about him.
The voice
is awesome.
As a whole, that's part of
the voice is great, and the series as a whole too, I think, is so much darker than the He-Man series, because it really starts with like the genocide of a whole or the destruction, the Holocaust of this whole people when their planet explodes, and we don't even know, are more Thundercats even still alive, and then Jaga dies on the ship. I don't think you would ever see anything like that on the Masters of the Universe TV series.
Yeah. So what was your experience with Thundercats though, Rob?
I mostly watched it on the Toonami block on Cartoon Network when I was probably in middle school or early high school, and it would be on with Voltron and Gundam Wing and Dragon Ball Z, stuff like that. So I saw it periodically, but I was not something I ever really grew up with when I was young. And then it seems like it had a big resurgence in the early 2000s. You would see it on TV, T-shirts and stuff like that, and you would see references on Family Guy and things like that. So it really kind of seemed to come back, but I think I mostly missed Thundercats for the most part.
Yeah.
Yeah, Thundercats, for some reason, again, not to poo-poo on Masters of the Universe, but from kind of an advertising, it's just grabs you more. And maybe it's because the cartoon did such a good job with the action, but even the characters, don't get me wrong, Masters of the Universe villains, awesome, but the cat they're sleeker kind of design. There's something a bit cooler, more smooth and sexy about the way that the Thundercats are portrayed in the Masters of the Universe. So I think I can see that lending itself a little better to the mainstream. If you're walking around with a He-Man shirt on, people are like, Skeletor you can get by with, but you walk around with a Lion-O shirt, or especially a Panthro shirt, people will be like, that dude's a badass.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think this segment is about to explode, so let's crawl into our suspended animation pods. Mike, I'm sorry, you might have to just pilot the ship. I hope you make it. We're gonna crash land on Earth 3, also known as Exploring Multiversity.
I am your guide through these vast new realities. Follow me and ponder the question, what if?
And today, we are asking the question, what if He-Man teamed up with the Thundercats? Or more importantly, what would happen if Skeletor and Mumm-Ra amalgamated and had the Sword of Power? So this is the comic book He-Man / Thundercats, issues number 1 through 6 from DC Comics. From December 2016 to March 2017, the 6 stories are Swords and Omens, When Thunder Strikes, Swords and Sorrows, a lot of things with swords, Clash of Titans, The Fall of Grayskull, and a Beatles reference, Across the Universe.
So the whole series is written by Rob David and Lloyd Goldfine. Rob David works for Mattel as VP of Content Creation. He's really been the modern shepherd of He-Man a lot, though this and one other issue of the DC run are all that he's written, but he was the EP on the He-Man Revelation series and co-creator of the He-Man CGI reboot. Lloyd Goldfine also working for Mattel's story and entertainment branch and co-plotted the He-Man series with Rob David, published by DC, and worked on a lot of other TV like TMNT, UGO, etc. This series was entirely penciled and inked by Freddie E. Williams II. So Freddie Williams started working with DC in 2005 on Seven Soldiers, Mr. Miracle. He's illustrated Batman, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, has done additional work for DC like Flash, Blue Beetle, Green Arrow, Robin, JSA, some work for Marvel, IDW, Dark Horse, Image, and has even done some Hallmark cards in his distinct style. The coloring is Jeremy Caldwell, lettered by Darren Bennett, and edited by Christy Quinn. And so we will go issue by issue. There's 6. We'll give a quick summary for our listeners who aren't too familiar with the series, and then we'll talk about what is going on in these. So kicking off with issue 1, setting up the ancient spirits of evil from ThunderCats tell Mumm-Ra, the ever-living, to get the power sword from Eternia, and in a disguise as the sorceress, he stabs Prince Adam, who's really a major doofus in the series, and through the chest. And when he becomes He-Man, the wound is gone, and Mumm-Ra is defeated by Skeletor, who secretly allied with the ancient spirits of evil to get the power sword from a now evaporated Mumm-Ra. So that's our first issue. What did you all think of the setup of this series?
I was shocked that Prince Adam, I'm like, this guy's dead. How's he getting over this? I mean, it was gruesome.
And it's like lodged in there too. There's multiple pages and panels where there's Adam with just a giant, with the sword of power through his chest.
And that is a little ridiculous because he lives an awful long time with that sword. He just keeps going panel to panel. He's like, So yeah, but he eventually gets over it. And I don't know if it was do Mumm-Ra and Skeletor. I know what happens and I know how it happens. I can't remember if it happens in the second book or the first book, how they become amalgamated.
No, not yet.
Okay,
don't worry. I'll mention that.
I've got things to talk about there.
So not yet.
The stabbing, and spoiler alert for He-Man Revelations, but it actually brought to mind He-Man Revelations. I don't know if that did for you too, Guido, where there's this stabbing of the Prince Adam character, and it was like, oh, I wonder if Rob David recycled that idea later for the Revelation series, because that and really the overall tone of this whole series, which we can touch on throughout, reminded me a lot of the tone of the Revelation series, where it was not quite adult. It wasn't quite super serious. There's still Skeletor's it's still a little jokey, but it's also got blood and got this stabbing. It's much more gruesome than the original Motu animated series was.
Yeah, I agree. I felt the tone was similar. The one complaint I'll mention here, so that I don't have to mention it again, I don't love the narration device. So every issue has a narrator that's a character, and they're different. And I found it taking me out of the action to read caption boxes that were actually a character's narration that then is a surprise. Like the first issue is being narrated by Skeletor, and you don't realize that until Skeletor defeats Mumm-Ra at the end. So I found that device distracting.
I agree. It's the other thing about this first book especially is, and they have to set it up. They only have 6 issues, but they go through a lot in this first book, and there's just a lot of dialogue, and it's hard, especially, I think the thing is there's a lot of dialogue, and then you have the narration boxes on top of it, so you're bouncing back and forth a whole lot. You never feel like, even with a lot that happens in this, you never feel like you get into the flow of the action. You always feel like you're distracted. I am a very visual reader, and probably my raging ADHD, but I want to get down to the blood and guts and the action, and there's a little too much little too many words for a simple mind like mine.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so moving on, issue 2, He-Man fights Evil Lyn and his other enemies who are now allied with the mutants from Thundera and the ThunderCats enemies, like Monkeyin and Slithe, and they're kind of fun and weird too. And meanwhile, Skeletor drinks Mumm-Ra and uses the Power Sword to become a new amalgam. And by pulling the Power Sword power into him, He-Man reverts back to Adam and is now dead. And the ThunderCats come to confront Skelemumm-Man at this point. He has his own name later, but I'm going with Skelemumm-Man at this point. So that is issue 2. And yeah, Mike, why don't we let's get right to it. Let's talk about Skeletor and Mumm-Ra here.
He drank the damn corpse. I read that and I was like, holy shit, he just drank Mumm-Ra. This is crazy. So yeah, that's really crazy. Yeah, I think that took me through the entire book. It's like the whole Prince Adam being dead and stuff. That was secondary. It was like, he just drank the corpse of a dead mummy. And then Mumm-Ra's still kind of banging around. He's like, hey, I'm still here. It's like, this is wild.
Well, Skeletor, I mean, there is a humor with the Skeletor Mumm-Ra stuff that develops that is sometimes a little annoying and sometimes I love. And in this one, I love it because Skeletor is holding this beaker of Mumm-Ra's corpse. And he says, bottoms up, and the beaker is screaming, no! Like, it's so weird.
It's so good. I think it was things like that really I enjoyed the most about this. Is there was a gravity at times, but there was this ridiculous kind of, come on, man, who wrote this? I mean, when you write that and you take it to your editor, you're like, I want Skeletor to drink Mumm-Ra, but I want Mumm-Ra to be screaming when he does. And they're like, I'll allow it. So it's like, okay, this is kind of badass.
Yeah, this Skeletor in general, going back to what I was just saying too, it reminds me a lot of Mark Hamill's portrayal of Skeletor on the Revelation series, where he's not the silly doofus that the Alan Oppenheimer version is on the original animated series. He's more serious, but he's not the serious Frank Langella no comedy version of the live action film. He kind of straddles both worlds, and we get a lot of this, as you were indicating, Guido, in the scenes here with Mumm-Ra, where Mumm-Ra is kind of the straight man and Skeletor has a lot of the...
Oh, yeah.
Skeletor's constantly putting him down for being a mummy, and it's like, wait a second, you're a skeleton. How are you constantly saying this?
The best line of this series has to be, I've rendered him never living. I mean, Skeletor calling Mumm-Ra the never living when he's known as Mumm-Ra the ever living is pretty hilarious. So, yeah, the character of Skeletor is great here.
Yeah, they're all great. I do miss Mumm-Ra. I feel like, not to ruin anything in the series, but Skeletor kind of takes center stage. I mean, Mumm-Ra's still there in the background, but like we were talking about, how badass Mumm-Ra looks and how visually intimidating Mumm-Ra is, even though he's not as physically strong, I guess, in his big form he is. But yeah, I am a Team Mumm-Ra fan. I would have liked to have seen more of Mumm-Ra. I would just say that.
Especially with Freddie Williams' exaggerated art, I think that works for Mumm-Ra. And we'll probably talk more about the art throughout because I have some different feelings. But yeah, the Mumm-Ra depiction works with all those scary muscles and the things flowing off of his face and stuff. All right, so on to issue 3. Mumm-Ra and Skeletor fight about inhabiting the same body, but Mumm-Ra concedes because Skeletor's like, well, I'll fight the ThunderCats for you. And he's like, okay, fine. So the Mumm-Ra aspect, though, is defeated by Lion-O holding up the sword and causing the reflection to make Mumm-Ra revert. So Skeletor and Mumm-Ra end up having a bit of like a Three Stooges, right? Is that the best reference?
Yes,
Rob?
definitely.
Three Stooges fight where like he's punching himself and choking himself, and then Skeletor ends up poking his own eyes out. It's very slapstick. And then Lion-O arrives to Adam's funeral, and the ancient spirits of evil attack Eternia. But really, it's the Mumm-Ra Skeletor show.
Yeah, it reminded me of All of Me with Steve Martin, Lily Tomlin, or so any of those movies where you have someone possessing somebody else's body, and sometimes the one person's in control and sometimes somebody else is in control. Any of those kind of movies.
Yeah, my feeling was more just because I'm a big horror fan as Evil Dead 2 with Ash and the
Oh,
hand.
totally.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's what as soon as I saw him
totally.
poking.
Yeah.
As soon as I saw him poking himself in the eye, I was like, "Oh yeah, this is straight up Ash Williams."
Yes. Yeah, and and it gets so ridiculous because he ends up being able to, because Mumm-Ra has like more control, I guess, he actually will physically transform, and there's just this page where he goes back and forth from Mumm-Ra to Skeletor, and it says transform, and they're just arguing, and we get some great lines like Skeletor calling him "you decomposing dolt," and then Mumm-Ra says like, "with what army, jackass?" And then Mumm-Ra calls him Skelebor. So, and then Skeletor calls him Dumm-Ra the ever drooling. So there are some real lines in here that stand out as forever legends.
And to talk just a minute about the actual heroes of this story, I don't know, we do have the reveal in this issue or the previous issue where King Randor does find out that Prince Adam is He-Man, which is also something they did explore on the Revelation series. So I think another thing that they kind of said, "Ooh, we're going to actually do this on the TV series too." But one thing I had a question for you, Guido, maybe you know, but the Queen is not around, I guess. Is she dead? Because
No, she's in the first issue when they do some of the like Adam coming to court late and he's a bumbling fool stuff. She's standing there, but
it's weird because
no
she does
one-
not
no
have
one
a
writes
line.
Marlena. I don't
No,
know
because
why.
the King Randor has tons of stuff to do. He's a pretty big presence throughout these issues, and I was thinking, wait, is she dead? If she's dead, like, why is there no mention of this? But I guess they just were like, we've got enough women.
Oh yeah, well I'll mention that in a few issues.
Yes.
Definitely appealing to a male audience, as comics and cartoons of this nature tend to.
Yes. All right, so issue 4, the epic battle ensues on Eternia. We have Lion-O turning Cringer into Thundercat. I guess we just call him Thundercat, to beat the mutants who are just stealing a lot of gold for themselves, and revives He-Man using Mumm-Ra's sarcophagus. So He-Man is now evil, which of course sets up the classic hero versus hero fight with Lion-O, until he shows He-Man the sight beyond sight, and they become friends.
Yeah, we have to talk about how badass Cringer was when he became the Thunder. He was a badass.
It's a cool design.
I did not expect that at all. And then all of a sudden it's like, holy shit. I mean, I know he's Battle Cat, but this is like Battle Cat on steroids. It was just amazing. I loved it.
Yeah,
It's a
neat.
cool amalgam too. We'll see more amalgams later on, but it's a nice kind of foreshadowing of the amalgam of these two worlds.
Yeah, because they like anthropomorphize him so he looks like the Thundercats, and they bring out the yellow stripes more, and of course put the Thundercats logo on his chest somehow in his fur. It grows the logo. But who cares, because it looks cool.
Let's not let logic get in the way of a good story here, Guido.
No, definitely not here. And the battle between He-Man and Lion-O, it's got that bloody edge that this whole series has. I mean, there are moments they cut each other and they bleed a little, and He-Man is a little stronger for most of it, and then of course Lion-O invokes power beyond power, and then I love when they're just both holding giant granite statues and hitting each other with them. Like, you can tell they're equally matched then. So
Yeah,
it's fun.
you
and
need to
silly.
have this scene in these. We saw it also in the He-Man Superman issue that we covered on our previous episode, and really any Superman, Spider-Man, anytime these heroes meet, they have to have that one moment where they fight, and then no, okay, I'm okay again. We're friends.
Yeah, it felt like to me it went on just a little too long, but yeah, I mean, it was still good.
It's the whole issue.
Yeah, the issue was very, it was filler a little bit compared to some of the other. There was stuff going on, don't get me wrong, but yeah, it felt a little more fillery than the first three.
Yeah. Well, speaking of filler, let's go to issue 5, because this is an epic Eternian battle though it's not very exciting because it's just basically a device to give you the team ups that make the most sense. So you have just Man-at-Arms and Panthro do something together, and you have Orko first with Wily Kit and Wily Cat, and then with Snarf, and then you have Tila and Chitara because women, and then Jaga and Sorceress, and Jaga and Sorceress end up giving the power to everyone in the battle, so they can push back the ancient spirits of evil. And then at the very end of this issue, we get what he has named himself, the Skeletor, Mumm-Ra, and ancient spirits of evil amalgamation, Mummator.
Not good. Not good.
No, I think he could have done much better on that name.
You had 5 issues to come up with a better name, and this is what you lie on. But I can say this about Chitara and Tila. You know what? I kind of liked those two together. Yes, it is girls for the sake of being girls and girl power, but they seem to have a little more, at least on-panel chemistry than the rest of them. I would buy a miniseries of those two funning around.
Yeah. Well, and it is fun. Like, Chitara gets to use her powers, use her acrobatics, use her speed a little, while Tila sort of just flies around and is like the vehicle for her to do what she needs to. So,
and they have the antagonistic slightly antagonistic relationship between the two of them, while everyone else is kind of just getting along. They do have a bit of a prickly relationship.
I don't know about that. I think you're imposing a little bit of a catfight. Haha. I mean, they're just, they're working together. And Chitara even says, I do believe you and I are going places, Tila.
I'm going to say this. It actually reminded me a little bit, and I'm going to bring both of your points together. It felt a bit like the Exterminators run, where they were a little prickly with each other, but it was almost in jest, like they were kind of buddying together. And that Exterminators run is fabulous with that, with those girls just ripping into each other.
I know, I loved your coverage of that. I think
that.
You covered it, and then you talked about it when you were on Comic Book Keepers, and I love that series too.
It is
very similar, actually. You're right. It's the same tone. So yeah. And so I think the problem I have with this issue and why it feels like filler is like any one of these team ups would have been fun, but they get like a page or two at most because they're just going rapid fire through this epic battle. So it almost feels like they could have used some of the previous issue, reduced the He-Man Lion-O battle, and given us more of these character moments, I think.
Yeah, I think that is the thing, because issue 4 definitely has some filler. Issue 5 is literally just like eating like a bag of Cheetos or something. I mean, it's got its points, it's got its fun, but after you read it, you're like, what did I do? But for a series that is so compact, especially early on in the story, where it felt like maybe if you drug that out an extra issue or two, you could cut these and make this a little less filler and kind of drag the stories out. The pacing of this overall series felt a little too much. It was too fast and then too slow all at the same time.
Totally agreed.
It had, so we get the spirits of ancient evil become kaijus in this, and they're huge and battling, and it gave me a kind of a video game vibe, because what happens is they all have these golden discs around their neck,
which is
and they're
a true He-Man thing, the golden disc.
Oh, okay. Because they're trying to defeat them, and then they realize, or then the sorceress and Jaga come to them and tell them the Deus Ex Machina of, oh, you have to destroy these discs. So that gave me that very kind of video game thing where you're trying to defeat the boss, but then you kind of realize, oh, wait, no, I have to shoot that one thing that's on them, and that's actually how you get rid of their shields and destroy them. And the one thing I did love, I loved the Orko running bit here, where Orko, of course, which is classic Orko, he can never get his spells right, and then he's trying to get one, and of course it also turns out wrong, and it turns Snarf into a giant kaiju size one, and Snarf's able to accidentally knock the golden disc off and defeat them. So I loved Snarf getting into that, because those two are two characters that go really well together.
Yeah.
And no Adam, no He-Man or Lion-O in this whole issue, actually. Saving them for this final one.
Yeah, for the finale. All right, so in our finale, which really we could have done a whole episode just on this finale, and we'll talk about why in a moment, because He-Man and Lion-O confront Mummator. It doesn't work. I don't know why. I guess it's Skeletor, but...
It doesn't roll off the tongue well at all.
No, and it sounds like a machine that you buy somewhere, like, oh, go get the Mummator to fix that thing in the yard or whatever. So all right, so they confront Mummator at the nexus of all realities, swiping that from Marvel, thank you very much. This is the place where the multiverse intersects, and so we get to see, all too briefly, DC Earth Prime if we had Prince Adam be Superman. And it's very brief, sadly, but it's in Eterniaville. We get about 5 panels of this world, and we even get the reveal of the Clark Kent opening of the shirt to the He-Man sigil on the costume.
And his name is Adam Grayskull.
Adam Grayskull.
Because that's what Perry comes out and says, Grayskull. So, and we do have Lois and Jimmy. So I guess he's
and
Adam
LexCorp,
Grayskull.
and they work at the Daily Planet. So we have that moment. And then we have a moment of the Thundercats and He-Man being just fully amalgamated. So Chitara, Tila, one entity. Panthro, Man-at-Arms, one entity. They are called Chitila and Hio and Jagares. So Jaga and Sorceress are amalgamated. We have Orko and Snarf, known as Snarfo. And so we get this full amalgamation universe. And then ultimately, though, Lion-O and He-Man invoke their power beyond power together. They win. Lion-O admits in the epilogue that he's actually only 12 years old. And Mumm-Ra is the narrator of this issue. And it turns out reminds us that as long as evil exists, so too does Mumm-Ra. And then we get the exchange of catchphrases with the Masters of the Universe saying Thundercats ho, and the Thundercats saying by the power of Grayskull. So a lot in this issue alone that I wish had been more.
Yeah. Again, this issue was probably too much happened too quickly. Again, the pacing in this, the story. It's like, they wanted to tell things at certain times. I think I do understand issue 5. You've got to give the secondary characters a little bit of space to breathe. I think if you don't have them at all, it literally just turns into a He-Man Lion-O story, which is technically the majority of this book, and that's what we're here for. So, but yeah, there was a lot to digest in this one.
You get another Superman-esque moment in this as well, because another place that this orb, this MacGuffin thing that just suddenly appears at like issue 5 or issue 6, also brings them to see, Lion-O can see the vision of Thundera exploding, and he can see his father and himself as a little kid, and his parent he's getting on the ship with Jaga, all the stuff that kind of happens before the first episode of the TV series, really. So that's also giving such strong Superman Krypton vibes as well. And then Lion-O could actually use the orb to go back and save his father, bring his father onto the ship. And He-Man says, well, you could do that, but it's going to change everything that's happened since then. And everything that's happened since then has made you the person that you are today. So it's also giving that classic multiverse Superman thing, but maybe to what we're saying is like, it almost like that seems so heavy and so much to explore, like 4 panels. And it's about 4 panels. Yeah.
Well, same thing with the He-Man Superman amalgam. Like, it clearly they just wanted to do that. It has no Thundercats in it. It's just some other world, but I would have read that. I would have read that for 3 pages. Like, give me more. Or have that, have something, which they did do this. There is a series called He-Man and the Masters of the Multiverse, which was DC, and it was the last thing DC published under their license. And they pull in like the 8-bit He-Man, and they pull in the action figure He-Man, and they pull in Dolph Lundgren. Like, so they pull all the He-Man together. It would have been kind of fun in this if the Superman like got brought in and actually contributed to the fight, like if they had used these multiversal versions for any purpose other than this glimpse.
Yeah, too many multiverses happening too fast. I mean, you guys have an entire show about what ifs and multiverses, and they tried to cram like 17 into one issue.
Yes. Yeah, I would have liked any of them fleshed out. I don't know. Other than the names, I don't love the character designs of the Thundercats Masters of the Universe. It's very jarring to see like Tila as a cheetah or Man-at-Arms as a blue-skinned creature.
Yes.
But I like the names. It's really fun. Other than Hio, because Hio is, again, like, that's just a noise people make when they like when they stub their toe. It's like, Hio!
Lift a heavy box. Yeah.
Oh. And I know I'm going to actually probably contradict myself a little bit here, but I do have to say, especially near the end, Skeletor and Mumm-Ra together, they give off a very much like a Death's Head 2 vibe, and I love Death's Head 2, his visual.
Yeah, totally.
And
yes.
I really did like that, but I would have liked to see
It
more
does.
Mumm-Ra.
It does look like that. Well, I also think they, for so much page time that they have, their defeat is just over in a panel. Suddenly the heroes grab this orb, which has only really been introduced in the previous issue, and then the whole panel fills with blue, and then literally someone says, I think just the sorcerer says, they've been defeated. And it's like, wait, we kind of wanted to see these guys suffer. We wanted a funny final line from them, and it's just kind of one of those, no, and it's done. It's like, oh, okay, we kind of wanted to see a little bit more of a final battle here.
Yeah, I could tell you this from the types of books we review over on our podcast. This is typical. Bad guy running the show up until like one page. It's like, oh, he just fucks right off. It's like, okay.
All done. Well, and then they actually spend an enormous amount of time on epilogue in this. Like a shocking, almost as if it's one of those movies that has like 20 minutes at the end where you're like, okay, come on, I'm done. Because they call back to the belt scene with Prince Adam and his father, and Lion-O wants to know what the deal with the belt is, and you see like Orko and Wily Kid and Wily Cat and Cringer and Snarf exchange gifts with each other. Like, you just have all these moments where it's like, I don't really need all these moments. You could have given me more battle.
Yeah, either make this a 4-issue series and get rid of a lot of this excess, or make this 12 issues and spread it out and give us the good stuff. I'm fine with issue 5 being an entire issue of a 12-issue series, but not of a 6-issue series. So yeah, but it's these little things. I'm fine with that when you have more time, but like we were just talking about pacing again, it's like, hurry up to slow down. It's just like, give us an even pacing, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I totally agree. It could have been shorter or longer, but it's the wrong length where it is. I agree with that. And so I want to talk about my reaction to the art. And Mike, you said you really like it. I don't know how I feel about it, honestly. I'm unsure. And I know Freddie Williams' work, and so I know it's a very specific thing that he does. I don't know. It's jarring to me in some ways. The exaggerated, like, Rob Liefeld-ness of it. It's almost like watercolored Rob Liefeld at times, I think. I think it sort of works because the He-Man figures are like that and the Thundercats figures are like that. But then on the other hand, like, I don't find myself appreciating it as I'm moving through it. Maybe just because stylistically it's not for me. I don't know. So Mike, like, do you like Freddie Williams' work? Do you just like this art in this series?
I think it's this art in this series. I don't see as much, it doesn't come off to me as much Rob Liefeld. I see from the scratchiness of it, you get some of those vibes, but I think that he's not going pouches. He's not giving muscles on top of muscles on top of muscles. Because let's be honest here, both sets of these, these characters are very muscular, but I don't think he goes overboard. I think it's very right for the scene. And it's not a perfect example, but this artwork, especially for a story like this, I think it makes it flow a little better. I think if this was very bubbly, very much like, don't get me wrong, as a fan of John Byrne's artwork, regardless of what I think about the guy personally, I think John Byrne artwork wouldn't be good here. I think this
it would feel boring.
It would feel weird. And this has very much like an example of a newer series is Do a Power Bomb. I think that the artwork for that is not as clean as some people would think it should be, but I think that adds to the story. It's kind of like this kind of chaotic effect that keeps the story going a little bit when it should, when you feel like that is the one thing, the artwork kind of feels like it drags you to the next panel. I don't get stuck on one piece of artwork. It's like, I want to see what happens next. So I like the artwork here. It's different, but I'm here for it.
And you're right, it is a very consistent feeling like a Daniel Warren Johnson. Sorry, Rob, go ahead.
No, I actually really like the artwork too, and I think one of the things that makes it stand out for me is Jeremy Calmwell's colors as well. Everything is this kind of bright, super saturated colors. Guido, it actually reminds me of some of the coloring in Promethea as well. I don't know what you call this, but it's not, nothing's dull, nothing's super primary. It's like a lighter blue when it has to be a blue, and everything's a little more bright in that way. And I think that really makes it pop there.
Yeah. So, do we want to go back to this world? I guess Mike and I said we would have done another 6 issues, but do we want like a sequel series? Do we want to return to it?
You know what? I'll say I think this was enough of this story. I think that you could bring these two franchises together again. I think there's a lot of fun that could be had, even with the secondary characters. I don't think they were explored. I won't say enough because it was a short series. You can't explore everybody. You have to give front and center to He-Man, Skeletor, Mumm-Ra, Lion-O. That's your main characters. You only have 6 issues to do it. So I think I would like to see more. Like I said, and I know it sounds ridiculous. You give me a Chitara and Tila? Sorry, I'm thinking She-Ra. You give me a Chitara and Tila comedy.
Hey, she could be in the mix
where's
too.
She-Ra in this whole thing?
Yeah.
And in a way, yeah, I was hoping, the first time I read through this, I was hoping She-Ra saved the day, but she didn't, sadly. But yeah, there's some fun to be had here. Another crossover works for me, just not the same world, I guess, or, just a little more fun, I guess, and whatever. Who knows?
Yeah.
There's this weird little thing that you mentioned in your summary, Guido, where right before he goes away, Lion-O says, "Oh, by the way, I'm actually 12 years old. Bye." I actually
It is a weird moment.
And I actually think that could be explored more in a series, because I didn't know that about Lion-O until I just watched the pilot to prepare for this episode. I growing up watching ThunderCats, I never knew, he's actually a young boy, teenager but he's grown up. And of course, Prince Adam isn't quite that, but has those elements as well, where he's really somewhat immature and a bit of a scatterbrain, a little of that Clark Kent kind of thing, but is also He-Man. So I think there could be something that explores more of those. Throw in, and it's DC, right? So throw in Billy Batson.
I was going to say,
Shazam.
they should have a Lion-O. Yeah.
Yeah, have them all of those characters be together.
Yeah. Well, these sound like great possibilities, so why don't we ponder some more possibilities?
Yes, we will call down the power of Grayskull and move into pondering possibilities.
Will the future you describe be averted, averted, averted?
So, Guido, what are we talking about for our pondering possibilities?
We're just going to continue this same conversation. So, because since 2016, as I mentioned, there have been no ThunderCats comics, and there have been He-Man comics, but there was nothing that tied into this or was interesting to read in the context of this. So let's just keep talking about He-Man and ThunderCats. Do we think they'll cross over again? Who else could they cross over with? Do we think we'll see more of this kind of thing or less? Or, yeah, what do we want?
Well, we can't see much less because it hasn't been done again.
That's true.
So I'm going to guess I'd take more. The one thing I would like to see is I want to see the ThunderCats do the Cats musical. I don't want a ThunderCats movie with the graphics of the Cats musical, but yeah, I'd love to see that, a little song and dance. I'm here for it.
So, Mike, it's so funny because this was one of the questions I was going to ask you both as well, going back to pondering possibilities. So the Cats musical came out in 1981 and ThunderCats came out in 1985, right? So I was wondering, do you think the Cats musical was an influence on ThunderCats? Because they look very similar. If you look at the classic look of everything, and the Cats musical, while critically mixed, was a huge box office thing that ran for many, many years. So do either of you think that the Cats musical was actually an influence on the creation of ThunderCats?
I wouldn't say a direct influence probably, but it's very much like anything in pop culture. Everything influences everything else to some degree. I could see obviously, as much as I think the Thundercats are cool, they felt like a derivative work of Masters of the Universe. It's like, let's just take the same characters and let's make them cats, and give them the same attitude. But I could totally see where, the guys saw cats on the news, and like later on that night, he's like, I need to come up with a Masters of the Universe ripoff. He's like, let's do cats. Even not even like just kind of a subconscious thing. So yeah, it would not surprise me at all if subconsciously the musical did influence, Thundercats to some degree.
Yeah, and I don't know the history of like anthropomorphic cats. Were there other creatures or movies or things that had like that look?
Tigra, whatever.
Like, you mean in
Marvel?
Thundercats?
No, in Marvel Universe.
Oh, of course. Oh, right. Yeah. Although she's more a little bit like early Wonder Woman Cheetah, where she's just a beautiful woman who has like cheetah spots. Whereas I see like Panthro and Tigra from Thundercats, they're a little like uglier, right? Like they're more like the Cats musical characters.
Hey, now.
Yeah, Tigro and
I don't think you're going to be
Tigro and
attracted
Cheetara.
to these people. They're
Tigro
cats.
and Cheetara look very Cats musical.
Hey, man.
having seen the Cats musical when I was actually growing up on Broadway, it's like, oh wow, they do look a lot alike. So yeah, but I think you're right, Mike. I think it's just one of those things where people are always taking from various things in the zeitgeist at the moment, and maybe just it was like, well, people like cats, people like He-Man, I'm just gonna kind of put the two together a little bit.
Yeah, music's that way, where you'll hear a band write a song that's exactly the same song as another band that, Led Zeppelin gets ripped off all the time, but Led Zeppelin ripped off, every blues guy before them.
Yeah, sure.
So it really is kind of a, things influence you and you don't even know that you're doing it. And it's like, oh, I've got this great idea. It's like, well, somebody else had it, or, maybe you amalgamated it, like you said. And that happens all the time. So yeah, I'm here for that possibility, Rob.
Yeah, I think both of these franchises are great team-up franchises because they do have these interesting characters and they do have this whole world built around them. So I am surprised Thundercats doesn't see more revival as much as He-Man does. He-Man has had a few team-up miniseries. They've done a He-Man and the Injustice world of DC. They've done He-Man just with the core DC when DC was publishing, and then obviously the He-Man Thundercats. But Thundercats hasn't gotten the team-ups, but I think any of them have any potential you could do. Not that this would happen because of company control, but you could easily do Thundercats and the Avengers, Thundercats and the X-Men, He-Man and the X-Men, He-Man and the Avengers, like any of these things.
The team aspect helps, and I was always surprised that you had this other classic team up of G.I. Joe and Transformers, because Transformers always seems hard to pigeonhole fit into something else. It's like the Avengers, and then also the giant robots that also become semi trucks. Like, that doesn't seem to be something you can put together as well as the Avengers and an Avengers like team that happen to kind of look like cats. So that seems to be something that can work much better together. They are basically just superheroes that kind of look like cats, but they don't even really have cat-like. It's not like they suddenly start purring and wanting milk.
Cheetara is the only one who, like, her powers have to do with a cheetah, but she's really it. Like, otherwise, they all just have weapons.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, Tigro can make illusions, but that's also something.
Right.
Well,
I don't think cats
nothing
can do
cat
that,
related.
as far as I know.
I'm 100% here for Cat Vengers multiverse crossover.
Yeah. And I hope we keep seeing this. I don't know. It does feel like there have been fewer. I wonder if in this era of like massive content saturation, if IP people are getting so much more protective.
I think that's it. The IP and it's called intellectual property for a reason. I think people used to be fast and loose with it, and they really wanted to tell more stories. But not to rip on capitalism, but everybody's out to make a buck now, and they're afraid that somebody's going to kind of ruin their IP, so they're very protective, and it's costly. It's just cheaper to make your own. That way, you have it for the rest of your life. And like we were talking about, just take it and amalgamate it a little bit, change it a little bit, and then you have your own IP, and you ain't got to worry about it anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and both of these things, as we've seen, have struggled in development hell in terms of becoming a movie. So they're both in that same way, and I think both for similar reasons, because both of them, as much as I love the live action Masters of the Universe film, there's something about it that just does lend itself to drawing. Are you ever going to get an actor that looks as buff as He-Man? No, probably not. Do you want to see, like the Cats musical movie, someone who really looks like Lion-O on film? Maybe not.
Well, I think that about does it, dear watchers. Thank you for listening, and special thank you to Mike. Can you direct our listeners on how they can find you, support Multiverse of Badness, and listen?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on. This is always a great time. Like I said, I love the live action sounds, and it really is. This is an immersive show to be on. It's as exciting to be on as it is to listen to. I'm just pleased as punch to be here. But as far as where you can reach us, again, Multiverse of Badness, we're a podcast. You can find us in most podcast places. I'm not going to wear you out with that. You can reach us on social media, on Mastodon, in the Fediverse, at Multiverse of Badness, at toot.whales. Just look for the hashtag comics. And I'm out there posting almost every day. It's a fun little community. Hopefully I can talk these guys into joining and shelving some other social media platforms that we all love to hate. But yeah, yes. That's where you reach me. Also, just send me an email, anything at multiverseofbadness.com. You can send it to Mummator Skeletor at multiverseofbadness.com. So no, but thank you.
Or Skeletor drank Mumm-Ra at multiverseofbadness.com.
The delicious corpse of a mummy at multiverseofbadness.com.
Well, thank you again for joining and suggesting. I have been Guido O.
And I have been Rob Snarf.
Our reading list is in the show notes. You can follow us at Dear Watchers.
Leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We'll be back soon with another trip through the multiverse.
And in the meantime, in the words of Uachu, keep pondering the possibilities.
Oh!